Yeah, I just started it. I think it's. Hi, everybody. I think I see a few people here. Yeah, as you come in, this is a new platform, so I just first of all really thank you, thank you, thank you for being here today because in addition to you guys getting a nice herbal training, hopefully, that you're helping me test this webinar platform out, and I really appreciate that because after the last time I did a webinar, it was like it just flopped both times, and there's a story behind that, but I switched platforms. So here I am. Good morning, you guys. Good morning, Annette from Missouri. Awesome. And Christine from California. And Michelle. Oh, it's Shell Smith with Sunday name. Awesome. Can you guys hear me okay? If you could let me know, that would be amazing. And I think we've got a little bit of a lag time here. But again, I just want to say how much I appreciate you all. Thank you and thank you and thank you. So, oh, Western Washington, you're close by, Cleveland. Um, Good afternoon. So, are you guys hearing me okay? Just go ahead and put yes if you can. I better type that in case you're not hearing me. I hope so. I'm so sorry. Are you guys still here? I hope. It kicked me out of the room for a second. I might have too many tabs open. I'm going to go ahead and close this browser over here. Okay. Um, Frozen. I'm sorry, Joan. Okay. I should be back. I should be back. All right. I'm sorry, Pat. I'm here. I'm here. So please don't leave. It kicked me out and I got back in. So let me know if you can hear me again, please, if you could. I imagine you can. Oh, we have somebody from Utah. I love that state. So pretty there. Oh, good. Thanks, you guys. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and start again. So oh, okay. Joe just told me there's a 5-second delay. Also, I think this is streaming on YouTube. I'm not sure about that. So hope maybe we'll get some people from YouTube listening in as well. Um, Thanks, you guys. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up the slide deck here for us, and we'll just get started. But I just want to say that as far as wound care goes, there are like 4 major phases to wound care. Each of those phases is worthy of several hours of discussion, and we're just going to kind of gloss over those a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and dig into the herbs. There's some specific categories of herbs that are really helpful for herb care or wound care. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So that's what this little webinar is for, and this time is just for you. If you've been on any of my previous webinars, these slides are probably pretty familiar to you, but if you have a question, feel free to ask at any time. You can just put it in the chat. I've got Joe here, and it looks like Cindy's here, and there are other people here who can probably actually answer questions. Some of my students in here are very experienced, so they can help answer questions too. So if you don't know me, my name is Heidi Villegas, and I am the founder and the lead instructor at Healing Harvest Homestead and the School of Botanical Arts and Sciences, which I created. Once I realized that my herbal journey kind of was on a not the same kind of a path as recently, because I started a long time ago, before the internet, and I had a hard time learning it all, and I don't know it all now either, by the way, but there's a lot to learn, and it's helpful when you have help. So anyway, I created Healing Harvest Homestead, my website, to write about herbalism, and then it turned into a school, and I started a YouTube channel. So I've got all those things, and I probably won't go into all this, but I've taken thousands of hours of coursework and classes and certification programs. But I'll tell you what, the biggest experience is doing it yourself. So when you start working with herbs yourself and start making your own preparations, it's amazing what you're going to learn from that. That's the best way to learn. Anyway, I am a fur baby mama of many animals. I should say a fur feather mama too. We have 32 chickens. I'm a homesteader as well. I'm a teacher and a writer, and I'm a grandma to many grandchildren now. And this is one of my little babies. We were out picking chamomile that day. So really quickly, why should you bother learning herbalism? And many of you here are on my email list, I think. So you're interested in learning herbalism and you have your own reasons, but go ahead and put in the chat. Why is it that you want to learn herbalism? I would love to know, what you're thinking about that. So I know for me, these are some of my reasons. I became interested in herbalism because of health issues that I was having, but I quickly realized that real medicine grows all around us. And how amazing is that? God put these medicinal plants at our fingertips. And so I wanted to learn all about that once I realized that. Self-reliance and independence, there's nothing better than knowing how to take care of your family, like Leslie just said, and knowing what to do, knowing what herbal preparation to grab, independence from big pharma. That was a huge one for me. I was so tired of prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs. Yes, Deborah says modern medicine failed me. Here, that's me too. Over, and not just once or twice, but over and over and over again. Saving money, there's a little bit of an investment at the outset, but honestly, in the long term, you save so much money. It's crazy. They support your health and healing, which pharmaceuticals don't. They actually, that's why we have side effects. And then leaving a legacy of knowledge. I feel like, and not that I'm a conspiracy theorist, but censorship is real online right now. And I have a feeling that this knowledge is going to be snatched away from us again, like it was back in the 1930s and the 1940s. It was taken away from the general public, and everybody was re-educated to believe they needed a pill. And it wasn't until the 1960s, with the rise of the back to earth, some people will say the hippie movement, but herbalism started to be on a rise, and now it's really taking off because people know that the herbs work. And you guys are putting such good things in here. Yes, frustration with allopathic doctors practicing on me and acting like they already know it all, which nobody knows it all. And our bodies are all different. and they want to treat us all the same. So I could go on a little rant, but I won't. Brenda says, I work with clients through my online wellness center and want to be able to offer them every possible option. Brenda, bless you. That is amazing because there are tons of holistic and alternative healthcare modalities. The more we can offer, the better. So taking care of my family, Beverly says. Melinda says to control what goes into my body. Absolutely. You don't have to worry about the supply chain if you're growing and making your own. That is so true. Yep. And I could talk a lot about that too. I get a lot of emails asking about, hey, what can I do? What can I do to handle a cough or handle a fever? Okay. So yes, that's all of these are really good reasons. So now let's get into the basic wound care. I won't bore you with any more of that stuff, but we'll just get into the wound care. So these are the basics right here, and then we're going to dive into the plants, which that's the exciting part. So you want to clean the wound first, and then you want to dry the wound. You guys can't hear me? Uh-oh. Okay, I think you guys can hear me. I got an old comment, I think. Okay, you want to clean it really well. Soap and water, if you're out in the field. You can use a wash, an herbal wash, or if you've got something that's kind of antiseptic, you can use that. And then you want to dry the wound. Okay, so to dry the wound, it's really helpful to just let it air dry. I'm talking like a minor wound, of course. This is one like a scrape or a sliver, something like that. Or maybe, you've got it can be a larger one, but you want to kind of let it air out if it's not bleeding profusely, okay? If it's bleeding profusely, then you need to stop the bleeding. And then the third thing is you want to apply a medicinal agent as the situation requires. So like for stings, honestly, plantain poultices are the best. They're amazing. They work really fast and really well in most cases. I suggest too, if you have a person who's allergic, having something like, and I'm not a fan of over-the-counter drugs, but Benadryl is the one that I do keep on hand because you never know if somebody's going to have a life-threatening reaction. And then there's burns. So for burns, we'll just talk really briefly about burns. So I love St. John's wort for burns, for first degree burns. Let's just talk about the degrees. So if it's a minor burn and it's red and it just hurts, they can be very painful. Using some ice water on it and then cooling it down to get rid of the pain, then applying some St. John's wort salve is really helpful. The next step up is the second degree burns. And this is where you need to know a few things that are very important. So with second degree burns, these are the ones that are blistered, that, they're worse than just a normal burn. You don't want to put ice water or ice on those, okay? That can cause tissue damage. And let's see here, let me make sure I'm not missing any questions here. But that can cause tissue damage, and you don't want that. And then you want to rinse the wound or the burn with some lukewarm water until the pain isn't so bad. You don't want to break any blisters that are there. You want to be very gentle. You can wrap it gently, especially if there's a blister that's closing it off. Sprays are okay, but you do not want to put a salve on a second degree burn because you can trap the heat inside, and that's not a good idea. You want the area to be open and cooling. And then it's a good idea to keep the area raised in case of, it reduces the inflammation. So that's for a second degree burn. You might actually want to go to a doctor too and get some medical care for a second degree burn. Finally, third degree burns, those always require a medical visit. Okay, you don't want to mess with any kind of third degree burn. And if you're in the field, and you're far away, then do your best. treat it more like a second degree burn. And then wounds. With any kind of wound, you need to take into account how deep it is, the amount of bleeding, etc. And we're going to get into more with basic wounds in just a moment here. So quickly, there are some types of herbal preparations that you should have on hand, like poultices, washes, which are teas and tinctures, are both really good washes. Water-based extracts are really helpful. Um, and sprays are great. You know, you can tuck a little 1 ounce spray into your backpack when you go hiking and have it ready to go. And especially if you have children with you, most kids will accept this spray on a boo-boo pretty well. And you can keep it, you know, have an antiseptic one for ready to go. Salves in some situations, and we'll talk about when to use a salve and when not to use a salve. And then powders can be helpful for some things too. Okay. Yes, Teresa says, what about using aloe vera on a burn? Absolutely. You, especially first degree burns, aloe vera is amazing. Okay, very, very excellent for burns. And when we get to the herbs, you're going to see that one pop up. Aloe is really a nice. I have several aloe plants growing in my house, and I will never be without aloe vera. So, but there's 5 herbal categories for wound care. Okay, so these are categories of herbs, and I know I kind of geek out on all this stuff, but not every herb works for every wound. So you need to know which herbs you want to grab for and reach for a specific situation. So here are some basic herbal actions to know about wound care. So there are styptic herbs, there are vulnerary herbs, there are demulcent herbs and astringent herbs. And then I kind of put these I have a little special herb category. These have a special chemical that helps with cell proliferation. And we'll get into all of these terms and the herbs that go with them right now. So styptic herbs, I love styptics. They are amazing, and the ones I'm going to share with you especially. But these are those herbs that stop bleeding. Now, we live on a homestead, and Joe and I actually cut ourselves fairly often, especially Joe. And you know, I've actually cut myself to the bone before, and never went and got stitches. I just used my styptics and wrapped really tight. I've told that story to students before, but some of these herbs are amazing, like cayenne. I always keep cayenne powder around in the kitchen and in other places because it is, in my opinion, besides yarrow, which is also pictured here, these 2 herbs are the strongest styptics that most of us here in the West, you know, the part of the United States and Canada that we have access to and have around us. And I should include Great Britain too as well. But here are some herb examples, other ones besides yarrow and cayenne, but shepherd's purse is another amazing one. So cayenne usually has to be cultivated in temperate climates, but in South America and in Mexico, it generally grows really well and is actually even a perennial in warmer areas. Yarrow and shepherd's purse tends to grow in fields in most of broad range. So it's very, very likely you have yarrow or shepherd's purse, one or the other, or both, growing around you. So you can harvest these and powder them up and have the powder ready to go in a poultice. And I use kaolin clay as well. Now, I want to talk about the clay really fast because I came across a recipe the other day, and and honestly, this happens quite often where I'll come across a recipe and I know it's written by somebody who's not trained. But this lady was writing about styptics and clotting a wound, and she was mentioning bentonite clay. And you don't want to use bentonite clay, okay? If that's all you have, reach for it. But it's kaolin clay that has a specific chemical. It's been clinically studied, and it is a styptic. So I actually love to combine kaolin clay, cayenne, and yarrow. And we don't have shepherd's purse around here that I'm aware of. If I did, I'd be using that too. But I just combine those 3 in a nice powder and then create a poultice. And you can put the powders in layers of cheesecloth and then wet them or not. If you're dealing with a gushing wound, just lay it right on there. And I've even sprinkled the powders directly in the wound. That's not the best situation, but if that's all you've got, then you should do that. Another thing about wounds that are bleeding, we'll talk about that really fast. So there's three levels of bleeding, and I believe this comes from Michael Moore, a very famous herbalist. Either him or Matthew Wood. It was one of them. But he basically talks about levels of bleeding. So level one is your capillaries, and those are the more surface blood vessels. So like when you cut your skin or even a couple layers into your skin, those are likely to be your capillaries. And then level two are your arterioles. These are larger um, veins and arteries that kind of tend to flow into the large arteries, which are level three. Your arteries where if you burst one of those, you're on your way out, basically. So if you have an issue with a wound that's at level two or level three, you need to get to the doctor or get medical help immediately. And the whole I'm not going to go into wound care for very, very serious wounds like that, but for capillaries and more surface things, like when I cut my finger to the bone, that was pretty surface. I'm not hitting any arterioles or arteries. That's when I just dumped the cayenne powder right in there. I rinsed it real well in water, cleaned it out, and flushed it, and then I put the cayenne powder on it and wrapped it very tightly, and the bleeding stopped. Another thing about cayenne to know, because I know people are probably going, oh my gosh, I would never put cayenne pepper in a wound. It would hurt really, really bad, right? And so I just want to tell you that cayenne contains capsaicin, and capsaicin has an anti-nociceptive property, which causes you not to recognize the pain. So it's actually a surface analgesic, which is really helpful. So another reason to love cayenne powder, right? But you can do poultices, put it directly in the wound. You can combine the herbs and the clay, and then open wounds. This is where you'd use your styptic herbs, definitely on wounds that are open. Next category is vulnerary herbs. And if you guys have any questions as I'm doing this, please just ask in the chat there. So vulnerary herbs are special herbs that quickly heal the skin. They have different capabilities, and vulnerary herbs can actually act differently from each other. They don't all act the same. So this is where understanding the kind of wound you have, and then knowing which vulneraries do different things, allows you as an herbalist to choose the right herb for the right wound. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Acacia, yes, we are going to have a replay, and I don't know why you've been trying to connect for 20 minutes. I don't know if, hopefully I hate to say this, I hope it's on your end and not mine. But anyway, but vulneraries, because otherwise everybody will be impacted. Gina says, what was that word? It was vulnerary. So you can see it right here on the slide deck, and but they quickly heal the skin. So vulnerary herbs are going to be generally not, some of them are kind of neutral, but they're going to be in one category or another. One of those categories is tannic or astringent, and the other category is mucilaginous or slimy. Okay, so here are some vulnerary herbs, and I just kind of put them all on there. Some of these are astringent, some of these have mucilage, and we're going to talk more about those two words in just a moment. But vulnerary herbs are herbs like calendula. Look, there's yarrow again. Yarrow is a wonderful vulnerary, as well as being a styptic. Comfrey, plantain, St. John's wort, chamomile, and there are actually a lot of other vulnerary herbs that help to heal the skin. These are some of the main ones. All right, so let's talk about the astringent category really quickly. So astringent herbs, you've probably heard of the word astringent. Astringing means that these chemicals tighten tissue, they tone the tissue. This is where we get the word tonic from, but they help tighten things up. They're really great categories of herbs to know and know how to use. But they dry out, in terms of wound care, they dry out wet, weepy wounds. So if you've got a wound that just is so just wet for some reason, like it just won't heal over, it maybe contains an infection or pus, astringent herbs can be very helpful. They contain tannins, And tannins, they help create an impervious layer by toning the area up. So they tighten the tissues and they create a situation over the wound that helps keep things out, and that helps the healing occur beneath the surface to the top, which is granulation. And that's something you want if you've got an open wound. So astringent herbs are really good herbs to use for those open wounds or wounds that even have just happened. And then many of these are antibacterial and antimicrobial as well. So they might have some antiseptic properties. So they're doing all of these different jobs for us when we use astringent herbs and when we get a wound. Oh, I'm looking in the chat here that, oh, Gina, that's antinociceptive. So you know what? Let me type that in here, and you guys can look that up, or we can talk about it. It is a pain relieving word. Okay. All right. So these are your astringents. Over here in the picture, we've got echinacea, yarrow, calendula. Golden seal is a very nice astringent. Now, golden seal is endangered. It's on the endangered list. So another really good herb to use as a substitute is Oregon grapefruit, and it's not endangered, and the chemical constituents are almost exactly the same. So astringent herbs, here are a few more of them. I just named calendula and echinacea and yarrow, but there's golden seal, which I named Oregon grapefruit, artichoke leaves. If you're down south, we were talking about artichoke leaves on the tribe chat the other day. Somebody was asking about them, and so that's why they were top of mind when I created this. Chaparral. So look at here. This is a picture of me. This was in the Mojave Desert many years ago, and I was harvesting chaparral. And I wanted to show this picture because it just shows you, look at that environment. But these medicinal herbs grow literally everywhere. You just need to know about your bioregional environment. And then you can go out and forage and harvest. Mormon tea is another one, high in tannins, that grows in this area of the Mojave Desert. That one popped into my head when I was reaching for that picture. Okay, the next, yes, Catherine says yarrow does everything, doesn't it? It does. Yarrow is amazing. Yarrow is, if I had to pick one herb to have in my garden, I think yarrow might actually be it. It would be really hard to pick just one herb, but yes, yarrow is incredible for so many reasons. Chamomile is actually another one. There's a lot. I could go into that forever. All right, let's talk about demulcent herbs. So demulcent herbs are often your vulneraries as well, but for a different reason. They're kind of opposite of astringents. They're very, very soothing, and they contain high amounts of mucilage. So mucilage is kind of a slimy substance, and it's very, very soothing to mucous membranes as well as open wounds, okay? They keep the surface area of a wound moist. So they're good to use when, like, let's just say you have a little guy who is out riding his bike and he falls off his bike and he gets a really bad scrape on his knee. Really a terrible place to have a scrape, right? And it's oozing and it's wet and it's moist. So rinse it off, dry it, maybe put an antiseptic herb or a wash on it. And then you can go ahead and apply a salve or an herbal oil that contains or is infused with one of these demulcent herbs. It's going to help keep it moist, and that can actually be helpful for 2 or 3 days for some wounds. Okay, now you do not want to put a demulcent herb on a weepy, wet, infected, or oozing wound. So you don't want to do that. So let's think about why for a second. We talk about energetics, right? So if you have a wet, weepy wound, and you don't want to put a demulcent, which is moistening and also wet. It's kind of a wetter type of a category of plant. You don't want to put those together, because if you have a weepy, wet, infected, or oozing wound, you want to dry it out. You want to make sure air can get to it, okay? And that's when you would want to use an astringent herb. And another area where you would want to use a demulcent herb is when there's too much dryness. So sometimes you'll get wounds, especially in very dry areas of the country. And or maybe the person is just a very dry, dehydrated type person. When there's too much dryness and things aren't healing, and you can like see it's just not moist enough, then adding a demulcent herb can help. Cracking skin. If you have, if you're a person who gets those cracks in your cuticles, this is very, very painful. And you can definitely apply demulcent herbal preparations to these. Sandra says, are you going to have all this information in text type? Sandra, yes, I finally got the PDF thing figured out for the slide deck, and I'll have the slide deck available to you. So honestly, all of the information I'm sharing with you verbally is not in the slide deck, but you'll get the slide deck information. So yeah, that's where the replay is going to be helpful. Okay, demulcents. So here are some categories of demulcent herbs. There's plantain, wonderful plant. This is the same one that you would use on stings, wasp stings, ant stings, bee stings. Marshmallow leaf and roots, that pretty flower right there was a marshmallow plant that was growing in my garden a few years ago. Comfrey is another one. Comfrey is incredible at healing wounds. And we're going to talk about comfrey in a moment, because there are times when you want to use it, and there are absolutely times when you don't want to use it, and it can actually be dangerous. So we'll talk about those times. Slippery elm is very moistening. Licorice root powder, chamomile is slightly moistening. Aloe vera, a very good one, especially for sunburns. Ginger, believe it or not, which is warming and stimulating, is also has some demulcent qualities. And pectin-rich fruits. So I was just thinking about pectins the other day, and thinking about how many fruits on our property contain high amounts of pectin. So obviously apples, but hawthorn berries are one. So you could even do a mash with these and apply those to a wound that needs some demulcent actions. All right, so let's get into a special chemical here. Some of these herbs contain a chemical called allantoin, and allantoin is absolutely amazing when it comes to cell regeneration. All right, it's been clinically studied quite a lot for this, but it heals things very, very quickly, even bones. So any tissue in your body, if you apply it topically or take it internally, it can really help your body tissues heal up fast. So this allantoin is a chemical constituent found in some plants. These are usually plants that have demulcent action. So again, these are your moistening plants. I've got a picture of a dandelion flower up there. The head of the flower contains allantoin. So I love using my dandelions in lotions. And I try to gather enough in the springtime to make sure I have enough infused oil to make lotions and creams from it. Very, very wonderful plant. And then we've got plantain and comfrey here. Now, here's when you would not want to use, yes, Melinda says elderberry also has pectin. It does. Yes, cactus. So you don't want to use herbs high in allantoin with puncture wounds or deep wounds, okay? The reason for that is, just consider a moment a puncture wound where you have a very narrow, wound that goes deep. Okay, so that's a puncture. What if you apply your comfrey or your plantain preparation to the surface of that, what'll end up possibly happening is you're going to, the cells on the top of the surface are going to heal too quickly, and that's going to create a situation inside the wound where it doesn't quite get the opportunity to heal correctly. So you might end up with an infection. You might end up with a festering abscess. There are a number of things that are not good that can happen if you heal the surface too quickly. The best situation is where the skin heals from the bottom up. And we're going to talk about plants that help with that too. So for like surface level scrapes and things like that, your comfrey is going to be wonderful. All right. If you have a broken collarbone, I'm going to use the collarbone example, even though that's not a wound. My stepmom broke her collarbone a couple years ago, and she called and asked if there was something she could do. And I said, absolutely. Drink a little comfrey tea for, 2 or 3 cups a day for about 2 to 3 weeks, no more than that, because comfrey does have pyrrolizidine alkaloids, and those are really, really hard on the liver. But for short-term acute use, you can, this is my belief, and herbalists all have different opinions about all kinds of things, but I believe that with short-term use, comfrey internally is okay, but this is not an herb you want to be taking every single day for a long period. But it can actually help heal your bones. And then, yep, I think I just covered all this. So beware, heals outside in if not careful, and you don't want that. So let's move on to the next slide, and we'll talk about healing from the inside out, which is always wonderful. Cheryl says, question, is there any reason these would not be suitable for use on livestock? So Cheryl, you know what? This is again my personal opinion, and having livestock myself, I would use any and all of these with my animals, to be honest. Okay. Animals, animals are, they're mammals, most, goats, cows, horses. So you would actually do the same kinds of things. And yeah, in fact, I've worked, I had a horse with he had a rope burn on his fetlock. It was my fault. He ended up getting caught in the rope, and it was terrible. And I was really, really, really afraid. And I used a number of these herbs on him, and it healed up immediately. I'm going to say immediately, but literally like the next day he was fine, and I was just amazed. Anyway, so let's go ahead and talk about your St. John's wort. All right, St. John's wort. I love this plant. It is one of my favorite plants that I look for every single summer. In most places, it blooms right around the solstice. In our area, because we're so far north, sometimes it's a little bit after the solstice, but generally speaking, it's a solstice herb. And look how bright and sunshiny is, The summer solstice is the peak of the longest day of the year, and the sun is shining the longest. And there you go with your St. John's wort. It's like a special present, I think, to all of us. But St. John's wort is wonderful for wounds. Many of us think of St. John's wort in terms of emotional wellness and mental wellness. Back in the 1990s, it got a little reputation for being an antidepressant herb, which it actually is when used correctly. And that is not as a substitute for a drug. It's not going to do the same thing, but it does lift the mood. It's wonderful. So as a wound care herb, St. John's wort is a vulnerary, skin healing, and it's a nervine. So it's excellent for pain as well. You'll notice if you're familiar with trauma oil, it's actually one of the ingredients in trauma oil, which is usually, there's different versions of it, but St. John's wort is always in there, and calendula is always in there. And then you might have arnica, or some people will put comfrey, depending. And I love St. John's wort because it heals from the deeper layers out. So if you apply a wash or an infused oil or a salve that's a St. John's wort infused preparation, that's a really nice choice for those scrapes that you can put a salve onto. Also, I heard this from, I think it was Sage Popham, but he said that it was a good choice for blood poisoning if you can't get to a doctor. He didn't specify how to use it, but as an herbalist, I would say use it internally and externally in that case, unless you have medical contraindications. One thing I want to say about St. John's wort, internally, externally, it's fine. But it is one of the medicinal herbs that has some of the greatest number of herb drug interactions. So if you're going to use this internally, please do. And if you're on medications, then you want to definitely look into whether or not you should use it. Very, very important. Okay. Oh, Murph, that's a great idea. Text form of the info would be great. I don't know if I can get a transcript of this or not. I will ask my husband if he can look into that. There might be a way we can get it from the video. Yes, you're right. Because I'm sharing a lot more that a lot more. Can't talk. I'm sharing a lot more than what's on the slides. I know. So here's regarding honey. Honey is a healer. This is another, it's not an herb, obviously, but it is natural. But many of us know that raw honey is excellent for wounds or burns, just all by itself. But you can infuse honey with herbs and power it up even more. And I actually have a recipe in this slide deck for you. I'm including a few recipes for you here. And then you definitely want to wait until you've stopped the bleeding and you clean the wound before you apply your honey. Let's see. I don't know if I can catch all these questions here. Let's see. Short-term use of comfrey and what? Just comfrey, Mary Jean. Internally, not externally so much. Sierra says, would love to make St. John's wort oil, but it doesn't grow here. This is so hard if you're in an area where St. John's wort doesn't grow, because you do want the fresh herb. It's good to find places where you can buy it from people who can go forage it. I know up here, Joe goes and forages large amounts for our students every year. So if you're a student, definitely in the tribe, I don't know if he does it for Ditch the Drugstore students. I think he does, but for students, he'll forage it. It's a lot of work, especially the shipping. So anyway, Cheryl says, thanks, Heidi. I thought so, but wanted to be sure. Awesome. Oh, well, thank you, Cheryl. She says, this is a fantastic webinar. Oh, good. I'm glad it's helpful. Okay, so that's how you work with honey. Honey is amazing. And then now let's talk about beeswax for a moment. Beeswax is one of those items, those ingredients, where some people say never use beeswax, and some people say no, beeswax is fine. So let's talk about this really fast. Beeswax is an occlusive, and an occlusive is a preparation or an ingredient that covers up the surface of something and keeps water and moisture out. So you need to understand how that works if you're wanting to use salves with beeswax. And this is one of the reasons why there are the cautions with salves that we have, because they're oil-based, which is somewhat occlusive, and they have the beeswax, which is completely occlusive. All right, so if you want moisture and air to be able to get to the wound, then be careful with your use of beeswax. And you can make salves that are more like ointments that have less beeswax. And that's a nice happy medium. So here's when you use your beeswax. When you have a dry wound that needs to stay moist and for the first few days. So, let's just say you've got a wound, a scrape that needs to scab over. Those are generally your drier wounds and they're on the process of healing. Applying a little salve on top of those keeps the scab and the edges of the skin from getting too dry and can be really helpful, especially if you've got little kids. You don't want them picking their scabs either. This actually, keeping those scabs a little moist helps with the desire to pick them, right? All right, let's talk about more on salves and waxes. So when and when not to use a salve. When you want to keep the wound moist, and it's good for fresh wounds and up to a few days, washing daily. You definitely want to wash the salve off every day. Give it another little antiseptic spray, let it air out and let the moisture escape a little bit, and then apply the salve. Scrape knees after you draw a sliver out. They're helpful. Drying salve is amazing actually for slivers. And then I want to talk about staph really fast. So if you have an infection or a deep wound, please don't use a salve. Not a good idea at all. They can trap bacteria and moisture inside. It's not good. Now, staph infections, if you're not sure if what's going on is staph or not, please don't apply a salve, because what happens is staph tends to spread in an anaerobic environment. So if you apply a little salve to an area that's infected with staph, you can actually spread it. And you don't want that. It could eat away your skin, and it's not a good not a good infection. Okay, so that's just one caution on that. So here's where we just get into the recipes really fast. So here are just some simple directions for how to make your own homemade QuikClot. If you don't know what QuikClot is, it's actually a commercial preparation. You can buy it online, and many preppers keep this in their medical supplies, but they have different sizes of bandages, and they stop bleeding quickly. All right, but you can make your own if you need to with, cayenne, yarrow, and kaolin clay, all of them or a combination of them, or even just one by itself. And you want it. I prefer, if you're going to do this, is just get rid. You can do this ahead of time. Get some cheesecloth, layer it, and then spread your powders in there and lightly roll it. You don't want too many layers. You want that the chemicals in the plant to be able to get out of the cheesecloth. But basically, you're going to go ahead and lay it right in the wound. If it's a gushing wound, just lay it right in there, or even just put the herb in there if you don't have the poultice ready. Okay, and very, very helpful. I think I told you that Joe and I, we've had situations where stitches are called for, and we have used our cayenne and yarrow and had no problems and no scarring. That's the other thing too. Like when you go and have stitches, it's likely you're going to deal with scars. And I have full range of movement on my finger. I didn't at first. It took me about, I'd say, a year to where I could get full range, but there is no scar. And it was to the bone. And I look at that sometimes and I'm like, oh my goodness, because I remember how bad it was. All right, herbal infused honey. So this is just a quick little recipe if you want to infuse your honey with some herbs. So you can use 1 part St. John's wort, 1 part lavender, which has antiseptic properties, and 1 part plantain. By the way, you could also use sage, rosemary, thyme, oregano. All of those mints from the mint family can have antiseptic properties. And Kelly says, your audio does sound like you're trying to talk underwater. Oh no, I don't want to take this out right now, because I might mess things up. I hope that's not the case for everybody. So you would add the dried herbs to a jar, and then you're going to cover with the raw honey. All right, I would cover it an inch or two, and then let it sit for about 6 weeks. And this is a case where I would put it in a window, a nice, not a sun blasting window, but just a warm window, and then let it infuse. After that, remove it. And if you warm the honey gently, you don't want to go over 115 degrees because you want those nice enzymes from the raw honey. But you can more easily strain off the liquid that way. And then you just bottle it up and you've got your medicinal honey to use. And by the way, you can even eat it. It's very tasty. Here's a tincture. Now, what I like to do with wound care tinctures and mouthwash tinctures and things like this is I like to tincture the herbs separately, and then I can combine them for the specific situation. Okay, so I like to keep these tinctures on hand for wound care: yarrow, echinacea, golden seal or Oregon grapefruit, cayenne, calendula, and there's a few others too that are just, really most of the ones I just shared here today. And then obviously a tincture is going to be a drying preparation because it's based in alcohol. Here's a wash recipe. So you can use your tincture for this if you want to, and just add a little water. The caveat is to be sure that you've got at least 30% alcohol in it, because that will help preserve it a little bit longer. The other thing you can do is to make a strong herbal decoction. And I say decoction because you do want that water to simmer a little bit to kill and sterilize the liquid, kill bacteria and sterilize it. But yarrow, echinacea, calendula, thyme, and then you just strain off that liquid when you're ready. It's going to be nice and strong and dark. And then to make your wash, you can actually use a squeeze bottle, so like a 4-ounce bottle, and then you would go ahead and add about a third of your 190 proof alcohol, if you have it, to 70% of the tea. Okay, and that's going to give you a pretty good wash. And the other thing is if you don't want to put the alcohol in because it will sting, you can just use the fresh tea as a wash. Now, and you can flush out a wound with that tea as well. The problem is that a tea will not keep. So it's not going to keep for more than about 48 hours if it's kept in the fridge, but please don't use it after the 2-day mark because it will have bacteria in it. So there are some herbal preparation methods that you need to know. And I think most of you guys on here probably know them. I talked about them. If you've been on my website, I talk about all of these. But water infusions, tinctures, glycerites, preserved sprays, acetum washes, poultices and compresses, herbal infused oils, herbal salves and balms, honeys, and then there are others too. But when you know how to make all these things, then you can quickly get your medicine chest together. Now, this is not a sales webinar, you guys, at all. This is something I'm just doing. But I want to offer you, if you want to get into Ditch the Drugstore early, if that's been on your plan, then you can. This is pretty much what it contains, and I can actually go through a tab that's got the Family Herbalist Certification program, so you can see what all's in there. If anybody's interested, if nobody's interested, I won't do it right now because that's not what this is for. But I just want to offer you, if you want to get in a little bit early and start getting going before I open up enrollment for the 7th round. I cannot believe we're in the 7th round already, but that's something that you can consider doing if you want to get started fast. The thing is that if you're not a student of mine, if you're yet, hopefully you will become one, and you're just on my email list, you're probably there because you want to make some changes and you want to learn herbalism. And I remember what that was like. And I remember when I was making that very first decision to buy a course, and I realized that, I had 2 or 3 books at that time, and I was learning things, but I realized that I knew just enough to be dangerous. And I remember some of the recommendations I told people back then, and I just cringe. But I took that first course, and it changed my life completely. And I kept taking courses after that. But taking a course, and especially if you've got a teacher who's there, most courses you don't have a teacher there, and I'm not going to talk a ton about that. So anyway, I don't know if Joe is putting the links in, but if you want to get in this weekend, that would be great. If not, that's fine. But it's a great course, and we're going to have a ton of fun this time around. So yeah, any questions, you guys, about wounds, or you can ask about the course if you want to, but you're welcome to ask anything here. Okay. Oh, Jean says I'll have to wait till my birthday in December. That's okay. You've got to do it when you're ready. It is Mother's Day coming up. I just thought about that. No, maybe that could be a Mother's Day present. Let's see. Joan says you can rewind for a screenshot later, but I prefer a written form. However, happy and grateful to receive them regardless of the form. Oh, okay, Joan. Yeah, you will get the slide deck. And I'll see if Joe or one of our helpers can do a transcript somehow. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions, you guys? Oh, Bonnie says, do you get to keep the course after you are done? Bonnie, okay, yes. I feel so strongly about this. Okay, so you know how you see some schools and they say, you have 6 months to complete this course, and then you lose access to it, and then life happens and you don't have time. And this has happened to me several times, specifically with one school. And I've wanted to go back 6 months later or a year later and just review, or access the materials because maybe I couldn't get through them. So no, at our school, once you buy the course as a course, which Ditch the Drugstore is a course, and so is the Family Herbalist Certification, you have an unlimited amount of time to access the materials, learn the materials, be part of the student community, which is amazing because we do weekly live question answer chats, and we learn so much in those. There's so much information in there. All of the videos that are in there now, and that includes the replays of the live chats, are on a fully searchable platform. But there are, you know, so many that so many times that I've had people ask me this question, and yes, you have access to it forever. And if you choose to do the certification program, you can take as long as you like. This is not a race, and I don't expect people to, you know, some people just can't drop everything, you know. So Kellen says, can you comment regarding using comfrey root powder externally for an aching joint, please? Helen, it depends on what's causing the aching joint. So if there is tissue damage of some kind going on with your joint, then it might be helpful. Um, and, you know, it could be helpful. You know, it just kind of depends on what is causing the aching joint. But definitely anti-inflammatory herbs would be called for joints. There are some that are going to be specific to joints, even essential oils. And I should actually say, especially essential oils, certain ones are very, very anti-inflammatory. Oh, and that's another thing I want to talk about with Ditch the Drugstore and also the Family Herbalist certification. Because I'm also an aromatherapist as well as an herbalist, I tend to teach aromatherapy in conjunction with herbalism, because in my mind, if you think about what an essential oil is, it's an extraction through steam distillation. It's simply another herbal extract. And but you do need special training to know how to use aromatherapy and essential oils correctly, because you can hurt yourself more easily with essential oils than with herbs. So, but I do teach them both together in this course, okay? And it's just you're getting like the basic foundations. Let's see here. How long can we keep honey with the plants? Catherine, you can keep the honey with the plants for as long as you like, especially if you use dried herbs. If you use fresh herbs, then you're going to have a shelf life because there's moisture in the plants. And anytime you're introducing moisture into a substance like honey, you might get a ferment, or you might get bacteria or mold growing. So I would suggest using the dried herbs. I didn't remember to say that. Christy says, will you be teaching energetics in this course? So Christy, we talk a lot about energetics. It's part of what herbalism is, but there is not a specific module on energetics. I'm actually getting ready to create a course for that, and that's likely to be included inside the Confident Herbalist Tribe, which is it's our membership. And the tribe is, I feel like I really spoil my tribe members. It's a long-term learning kind of a situation if you are really interested in digging deep, which would be energetics. I think I just talked about energetics the other day. It was either in the tribe or a YouTube video. Anyway, but it comes up a lot and we talk about it a lot. Yes, Chris, there will be a replay. Oh, good, Jean. Awesome. She's going through a Red Cross first aid class. That's such a good idea to do. All right. I'm just scrolling up and trying to see if I can make sure I got everything. Jean says you do spoil us, but we love it. I love it too, Jean. I love our weekly chats. Oh, that's another thing with Ditch the Drugstore. For the open round for the 6 weeks, we do weekly chats as well. So you get to get on there and ask me all of your questions, and it's a lot of fun. Yes, there should be a replay that you can have. Colleen says, yeah, thank you for the explanation regarding honey. So how do we remove the dried herbs with honey? Because it is so thick and it's not good to heat it. And Colleen, so what you want to do is you can gently warm it. Don't go over 115 degrees. That will thin the honey and you'll be able to strain off that herbal honey. Okay, just use a strainer and don't use powdered herbs. You want to use, cut and sifted herbs. Thank you, Mary Jean. All right, you guys. Oh, thank you, Cindy. Yeah, Cindy just put a link to my link tree in there. It's got links to my YouTube channel, my website. Um, I put out a lot of free content, so there's a lot out there that I do, and I hope that you'll take advantage of them and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're not on my newsletter list, get on the newsletter list. I put information in there that's not found online every single week. And let's see. Joan says, what is the correct procedure for infusing with herbal powders? Do you strain it like the dried herb plants? The answer is actually found on my website. But with herbal powders, you want to use about a third, and I'm talking folk method here, but about a third of the jar and of the herb, and then cover it with your product, your carrier oil or your alcohol, and for a tincture. And then, yes, you strain it just like the dried plant. The caveat with using powdered herbs, you guys, in your herbal preparations like tinctures and infused oils, is they have a tendency to compact at the bottom of the jar, and you want to be able to have some flow around the pieces of herbs. So you have to be sure to shake it. Whereas with a cut and sifted herb, you know, you have to shake those too, but not quite as much. All right. Kelly says, ditch the drugstore and Confident Herbalist Tribe is the best decision I've ever made. Oh, thanks, Kelly. That's so nice. All right. Okie dokie, guys. I guess we'll head out now. Thank you so much for being here. This was really fun to do. I should do more of these webinars. They make me a little nervous because, being live on video. But stay tuned. I will be doing replays of my 5 herbs webinars coming up in the next about 3 weeks from now. And that's when Open Cart for Ditch the Drugstore is going to, the official Open Cart, I should say, is going to take place. I would love to have you guys join us. It's just wonderful. Oh, Kelly's got a good question here. I want to answer this really fast. How about powdered herbs in the honey? So Kelly, if you're going to take the honey internally, then using the powdered herbs in the honey is just fine. That would be, a really wonderful way to take those herbs internally. It is practically impossible to strain out powdered herbs from honey. Like, it's really hard. I don't even know anybody who's ever done it. So I don't recommend powdered herbs infused in honey that you're going to use on wounds. You could, it's just going to be really grainy, okay? All right, you guys. Oh, Linda says, this has been a wonderful webinar. I love your sincerity and willingness to share your knowledge freely. Thank you so much. I took your Ditch the Drugstore and it was fantastic. Thank you so much. You did an excellent job. Linda, thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. Thank you, and thank you again for being here and letting me test out this platform on you. I'm going to do some work and see if I can figure out. Oh, no, Joe's got more questions for me here. I'm sorry. Let me answer these really fast. Oh, there's a whole Q&A chat over here. I'm sorry, you guys. Oh gosh, let me let me answer these. Oh, okay. Joe just said he's going to go ahead and put the recording inside the searchable area. So if you're in the tribe, it'll be there. There'll be a transcript for you there of the whole thing. But we'll try to get a transcript regardless. Okay, so Michelle says, would you consider putting golden seal or Oregon grapefruit in the quick clot to combat infection? And Michelle, you could. That's actually a really good idea. Yarrow actually has antiseptic properties, as does cayenne. But if you want to boost it up with, another one, golden seal and Oregon grapefruit would be really good choices. If I were to do that, I would probably do equal parts yarrow, yarrow, cayenne, and kale and clay, and then just put maybe 1/8 of a part of the golden seal, and you're going to have some nice effects from that. Joan says, what is the correct procedure for infusing powdered herbs? Okay, so Joan, I just quickly went over that, but fill your jar about a third full and then fill it to about an inch from the top with your tincture, your alcohol or your oil, and then be sure you shake that every single day. And then do the same thing. You're just going to let it sit for 4 to 6 weeks and then strain it off. Yeah, Cindy says that she has added Oregon grapefruit, Oregon grapefruit to her QuikClot. All right. Gina says, are there other wound herbs that I mentioned anti-nociceptive too? Cayenne is the best one there, Gina. There are other nociceptive or anti-nociceptive herbs, but cayenne is really, really helpful. And because it's kind of a specific one for bleeding wounds, I added it in here. All right, you guys, I'm going to sign off. We're over the hour mark, and I thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed this. And I need to figure out how to turn it off. I'll see you in the tribe if you're in the tribe. If you sign up for Ditch the Drugstore, I will see you on May 27th. That is our orientation and our welcome for the 7th round. And I hope you can join us if you haven't so far. If you're an existing student of Ditch the Drugstore, join us again. You can go through these open rounds as many times as you want. All right. Bye, guys. I love you all.